Awesome. Right, so, yep, I'm Steve. I've got a lot of slides to go through, so I'm going to keep introductions pretty light. So I'm Steve Naxon. I'm a software engineer at Dutrix. That's the intro. So, firstly, what is reflection? So, reflection lets you peek inside of an object in C#. You can ask for its properties. You can inquire about its methods. When you get those methods, you can, invoke them with just like strings and stuff. So, have you ever used it before? So, if you're ever using .NET, there's a few common use cases which you'll find. One of those is the factory pattern. So, if you're like working on an e-commerce website, you can use the factory pattern with reflection to create classes which process payments and maybe alter the values. Also dependency injection as well. So a lot of common frameworks use reflection to create classes and inject dependencies into your controllers. So here's a simple example. We're going to create a person class. It's got some properties. It's got a method that we can invoke. And we'll create our new person. We'll give it the first name John, last name Smith. And then we'll use reflection on our new class. So we'll try and get the first name. So we'll use this typeof thing to get the typeof object out of that class. We'll use the get property method on the type class, and we'll get the first name property, and then we'll get the value. And then when we do console write line, it should return John. Last name, we'll do a similar thing, but this time we'll use the instance. And that has a get type method on it, which returns the same thing. And we can get the property last name, get the value, and return Smith. And now we can also invoke methods. So same as before, we'll get the type, then we'll get a method, and then we'll invoke with the method. And it'll return John Smith. So that is a very simple example of reflection. You may think it's really, really cool. You want to jump ahead and start refactoring your code, getting some reflection there, but and you're really excited, like, oh, it's a new thing, let's play with it. But you probably shouldn't, because there's use cases for this, and to be like negligent, just start sticking it everywhere you don't want to do that. You need to stop and think, where can I use it without having too much of an impact and making code less readable. So don't rush to it. So yeah. It's powerful, and but if you're a junior dev, that probably ends up being like, oops, shiny, let's use it. So I've created an open source library called faker.net, and that's for generating fake data. So here's a GitHub repo. It's a port of a Ruby gem, which has a really nice API. So why add another one? There's plenty of C# libraries out there that already generate fake data, but I just like the API, the Ruby one, and I want to replicate that in C#. And I know there's been an argument about competing standards, like I don't like this, so I'll create a new one. But luckily I'm not creating a framework this time, it's just a small package. So there's people who contribute to this as well, mainly in October, when it's Hacktoberfest, so it's fine. But how does this relate to reflection? We have to take a journey inside this faker module. So this just passes a string and runs some faker modules on that string. So we've got the module, the method, and it returns the value from the method. So we'll have this string, mean anything, capitalized, crazy case. So it'll just go through this string, run the first name method on the name module, change that, do it again, then run the last name, then we get, pretty simple. But there is one thing that's linked to all this, it's this iFaking container, and that's what we're going to use reflection on. So without reflection, this is going to look like, well, it's going to be pretty simple. So we've got this parse method, pretty simple. But then when we're getting the value, we have to check, what's the name of the faker module we want to get, and then there's all these all these methods. So yeah, and then all these methods for these different modules. So it does get a little bit out of control, and it gets mental, absolutely mental. Yeah, and you're probably wondering how many lines of code is that? It's maybe over 9,000. But with reflection, we make it a little bit simpler. So it still looks pretty similar. Still like replace a string with the value, but now I've got this get faker, and this uses reflection. So we use the get type, get property, and we use the name of the faker module. And if it's not there, then we'll just throw an exception saying it doesn't exist. Then we use that property info we get back from the get faker method to then query about that module's methods. So here we get the method. Then sometimes these methods require parameters. So we build those parameters, and then we invoke the method with those parameters, and then return it as a string. And then, like I said before, we just inject it into the returning string. And if something fails, we'll just return the input. That's basically how I added reflection into this library. So there's a few things that you could try to get started with reflection. So like I did before, you create a simple class with methods and properties. You could look at documentation for the activator class, which builds instances of classes. Like I did before, invoking methods, returning values, and all that jazz. And there's a GitHub repo underneath where there's a TDD style project where there's a few tests that are failing, and you've got to try and make them work with reflection. And that's 93 slides in
6 minutes.
Oh.